Is Gay here yet? Yes.
Yeah,
Got
I mean,
it. Okay, did you send her the meeting link?
yes, she said she's probably going to be a few minutes late.
Okay.
I also made an agenda so we could start on our agenda, and then when she joins us, we just jump over to the questions we have for her. And yes, Greg, I did include your question.
Okay.
Thank you. And I think Jillian Pearsall with the LSERS has agreed to help line up some speakers for CRT when we go ahead from the first from parent, teacher, student perspectives.
Nice. Let's see. I'm going to share.
Well, I can definitely speak on both of those myself. Parent, teacher.
Yeah, I intend to be heard.
Parent and a teacher. I know. I know, Greg. I think somebody's up front. Hold on, I'm on mute.
So while we wait for Tyra to come back, because she's at work, it's going to be hard for her. She's going to have to be jumping off and on. And while we wait for other people to join us, I see Sarah's here. I'll just go ahead and let her in. And then let me get out of that agenda and go back to the beginning. So she's here. I'll just go ahead and start on that slide. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, how are you? Sorry I'm a few minutes late. You know, like everything else, multitasking and being a mom and looking out for those kiddos.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you're not late because we're still having a few people get on. So
Okay.
Tyra is at work, so she'll be jumping off and on. But we do have a little bit of agenda to go through with you if you don't mind. Just a list of
sure.
things we would like to talk with you about. And screen a little bit organized here, so give me just a second.
Sure.
We can go around and ask everybody to introduce themselves. Greg, would you like to
go work? Can I go first since I don't have a customer, you all? Thank you. So my name is Tyra. Tyra. Oh goodness, y'all don't know what I was getting ready to say. Tyra Walker. I'm the co-chair of the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, as well as other hats that I wear, such as the secretary for JCPS.
Okay, good to see you.
Hello, look, I'm got the camera.
Greg Titchener, he, him, and I am an ECE teacher with JCPS. I'm involved with the Human and Civil Rights subcommittee of JCTA and do a lot of grassroots stuff where racism and social justice intersect with education.
Okay, great, thanks.
K.A.?
I'm K.A. Owens. I'm on the board of directors of the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. I'm very much interested in education issues. I spent 6 years at Catholic school and 6 years at public school, so very much interested. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Hey, Jim, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Jim Johnson. I'm on the steering committee of the Global Fellowship for Reconciliation. I taught 31 years in the Jefferson County Public School system, last 5 years as a middle school social studies teacher. So I'm greatly interested in not only the critical race theory, but the bill that Annika Scott will reintroduce next January state legislative session 2022 that will require the Kentucky Department of Education to include a more inclusive African-American history. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, great, thanks. And I share that social studies teacher background, 16 years of teaching US history, 2 for middle school and 14 for high school. So we could probably talk for days.
Yes, a long time.
Stephen Stegall. See you entered the room. Do you mind just introducing yourself?
Hey, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Steve Stegall, new current athletic director, Newburgh Middle School. I've been with JCPS for 11 years. Got the wonderful opportunity to meet Gay. Due to my position, I think, this was everything kind of happens for a reason. We got into discussions about, just social justice, my experience at my former school, some of the things that we were trying to do with our racial equity team in BSU. That all that led to being here. So I'm happy to be here. Happy, to join the fight.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here and giving your time to this, especially time to our students and all the different roles that you are playing, whether it's in the district or not. I've kind of been peeking at Olivia Kraut's Twitter feed of the Oldham County meeting, which is taking place right now, and having flashbacks a little bit. Some of the signs are they're good. They're misspelled, and they're looking out for our children. So clearly they put a lot of thought into it before they showed up tonight.
I said my protest sign is just going to be a mirror to show them how silly they look.
They don't see it. There is some sort of lack of self-awareness, I think. I don't even know what to call it to some point. I have actually reached out to a couple of folks that not the most extreme, not the super scary people, not the ones who were, and I wouldn't even know how to do it, but flash in their like their little 3%er sign, whatever it is that they do. I think it's this, but none of them. But I've reached out to a couple of folks that I know are very involved with some of those organizations like Let Them Learn and No Left Turn, and said, I'm willing to meet you. Let's have coffee. Let's talk about what actually is happening, what isn't happening, where we can improve communication between our constituents and board members. And I sent it over the weekend, or maybe it was Friday. So I will say, it's a weekend, but as of yet, I've yet to receive any responses. So I'm very much trying to make myself available to everyone to the extent possible. I am one person. I'm also a mom and I do have a full-time job, but I'm trying. I'm giving them a platform. I'm giving them an opportunity. They say that the board won't listen, the board won't communicate with them. I'm trying, but as of yet, it's been crickets. So that could hopefully change, because I would love nothing more than to sit down with some of these folks with, all of my annotated documents and more than 20 years of experience in doing education in all different kinds of capacities, and especially social studies education, when they start trying to talk about US history. And I'm just, you know, I almost start twitching about some of the things that I hear said about what they think really happened versus what actually happened. It's a lot to unpack, certainly. And, you know, everybody does have their right to be heard, but not everyone has a right to bully, threaten, those kinds of things. And so what happened last week, I'll just kind of give you all what we saw from the front table, just so that you kind of have an idea. We had an executive session at 5. And then of course the regular meeting started at 6. And we finished our executive session like 10 or 15 minutes early. You know, there was enough time for everybody to kind of get a drink, go to the restroom before we transitioned downstairs. And we looked out the window and there's like 20 or 30 people out there. But knowing we were in the building and we're supposedly the ones that they want listening to them, they were not holding their signs toward the building. They were not shouting at us. They were definitely facing all of the news. And then at about 6 o'clock, you know, just as Chair Porter was starting to call everything into session, they started coming in. So they weren't, you know, in their seats at 6 o'clock. They started coming in at 6 o'clock or maybe a couple minutes later. So we were a little bit delayed getting started. Everything was moving along just like a normal meeting until the word diversity was used. And then it was the mumble, mumble, grumble, grumbles that got a little bit louder. You could kind of see almost like, you know, when children play telephone and they're whispering in each other's ear across the room, you could kind of see that happening. And then it was just, it kind of exploded from there. Security stepped in. They came over, I don't even remember who came over and asked us now to think of it, but somebody from Dr. Polio's cabinet or something asked us to go in if you've never been in the Stewart Auditorium, I'm sure some of you, or most of you probably have, but there's like a side conference room. So we went in there and my thought was, okay, if we walk out, they have nobody else to yell at, they'll calm down and go home. Well, a couple of our board members remained behind to challenge them, which that's their prerogative and their right. The shouting continued. I was listening at the door, trying to decide, you know, and at that point I knew before then that there was not a potential there for truly engaging conversation. That there wasn't going to be any kind of real listening taking place. There wasn't any kind of an open mind. And so I just waited for them to call us back in. We continued on. They started kind of leaving. Well, I will say when we came back in, probably half of them were gone. And it was apparently a mix of voluntary and involuntary leaving. And then we continued on the rest of the meeting and they just kind of started leaving a few people at a time. But of course, the ones who were not there when we came back into session were the ones who had been the loudest and just shouting, completely just disrespectful. Some of the things they were saying, even to our security officers, was a little, you know, contrary to some of their other positions, I think probably. And it was a mix of people in the sense that you had folks that I recognize personally. And so they are very much, you know, they live like in the Middletown area or East End, affluent, middle to upper class families. And then you had the folks who were wearing the openly racist iconography and symbols around their neck and on their shirts and things like that, holding up their 3%er signs and so forth. So it wasn't representative of just one group. It's these different groups that are coalescing together. Frank Simon was there. I don't know how long that guy's been around, but very familiar with his work. over the years as well. So that's kind of what happened. By the time we all went to our cars, and we have great security that makes sure that nobody's following us out to our cars or anything like that in the evening. And so, you know, we got out, we left. And to be perfectly honest, I think we've gotten, and I might be off a little bit, but maybe 5 emails that have come to, they send them to Dr. Polio's secretary, and then she forwards them out to all of us. We've gotten maybe 5 emails since the meeting, but I've received all of them like that. I have not received any emails about any of these pressing issues to my direct email address. So again, you know, trying to make myself available, and, you know, people claiming that they want to be heard by the board members, but yet they're not reaching out, you know, one-on-one. So that's the gist of it. Good times, learning experience.
I see my screen. Is it showing the pictures of all of the people that were at the board meeting, or is it still be the agenda?
No, it's scrolling through.
So I just was providing some visual aids to go with your story there.
And that 111%, or I'm sorry, 3%. I keep saying 111 when I look at it. That's how ingrained I am with that stuff. It took me halfway through the meeting to realize, oh, it was supposed to be 3 Roman numeral, or, you know, Roman numeral 1s.
Right.
That sign is the one that one of our local reporters, was it Shaquille Lord, I think, found on his news vehicle after the meeting. It was left like on the window of his car.
Greg has added in the chat part of a nationally organized disruption, which it was. In fact, Virginia had a disruption the same night Jefferson County did. And in fact, I was in Virginia. It was weird because I was watching it on the local TV in the hotel room where I was. And I was like,
it was cited as a deterrent at the national legislative level as well. I can't remember who.
Yes. They've got a playbook they're playing from, and we see them. We know who they are. And in fact, the same thing happened with the tax increase. I tried to have a sit-down meeting with Teresa Camariano and ask, what would it take? Is there anything that would help, you know, that you would support public education? And she was just dead set no, like there's nothing. I'm like, what about the kids? There will always be kids in public schools. Like and you could just tell there was some agenda that did not have kids' best interests at heart. So we can't reason with them. I call it ignorance is bliss. They want to hang on to their bliss. All right, so I'm gonna switch back to the agenda. I wanted to just take a minute, Sarah, to have you meet everybody on the call, but also hear a little bit about the Kentucky Alliance that is a great legacy that I don't think a lot of people are all that familiar with. The Kentucky Alliance was formed in 1974 by Ann Braden, Angela Davis, Bob Cunningham, and Susie Post. And the current co-chairs are Tyra, who's on our call, Shamika Parrish-Wright, and Dre Dawson. And we are the largest and oldest racial equity grassroots group in Louisville. And this slide is left over from the tax increase, so I apologize. So I didn't update that bullet down there. But we were cautious to come out. We finally did come out in favor of the tax increase, but we were cautious because we felt like the district needed to be responsive to the concerns that were coming out of this community, and there was a lot of resistance and just barreling through without waiting for support from the community that was going to be impacted the most. And so our local board, the Kentucky Alliance board, had tabled every motion. We made a motion every month to come out in support of the tax increase, and it kept getting tabled because we had unanswered questions and we had follow-up things that we needed to do. And so there was some misunderstanding as a result of that, because we had a list of demands that we wanted to make sure were heard, and every opportunity that we had to raise those concerns got shut out. Our grassroots voices were trampled during that time. And so this slide was from a meeting we actually had with Dr. Polio. We informed him of where we stood on the issues. And I repurposed the presentation that we made to him a while back because it has a lot of the stuff that it's still the same talking points, you know?
Yeah.
I'm
sorry, just real quick, with the 1974 founding, was that directly connected to the merger of the school districts, or?
Yes, it was. KA, were you around? Is anybody on this call around during that time? Because there was a lot going on in education in particular.
Well, talking about the history of the alliance, what happened, there was the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, which was founded by people who worked to get Angela Davis out of jail, right? And after she got out of jail, was cleared of charges, then she asked those folk, say, look, you people keep organizing. I mean, that's what real organizers do. You people keep organizing on issues, particularly with what became known as the prison industrial complex. And then there were chapters of the National Alliance all across the country. Of course, now there's only the Chicago Alliance and the Kentucky Alliance, but originally there were chapters, and then the Kentucky Alliance became a standalone organization with its own 501c3 and registration with the state. So no, the date 1974 is not linked to busing issues per se. It's just, you're talking about the Alliance becoming a standalone organization separate from the National Alliance.
Yeah, it was originally a civil rights organization organized by Ann Braden and Angela Davis. Had a lot to do with civil rights that at that time, as documented by Kate Foster's book, Southern Subversive.
I'm sorry. I'm going to turn off my video. I don't want anybody to think I'm just dodging out, but I don't know that my connection was very strong. So I just want to make sure I don't get dropped or anything.
All right, Jim, you kind of cut out. Were you finished?
No, I'm finished. That's fine.
All right. There was a lot going on during that time, but you're right. It was much bigger than education. And in fact, our history in 2002, and that's the next slide I think I have, is the Coalition for the People's Agenda was formed as a result of the city-county merger that was impending. We saw the imbalance of power that was going to happen as a result of the city-county merger. And the organization is also behind the formation of the first civilian review board called KAARPR, K-A, correct me if I'm wrong on any of that as well. We've installed, I believe, 3 historical markers so far. I think that's something that this would be a really great time in our history to be advocating for some more historical markers. So that's why I put so far, because I want to talk about that at some point. But KA, anything else you want to add to the history, or anybody else on the call?
Just as a note, the organization always has had a strong interest in education issues. So, there's no question of that. Thank you.
Absolutely. And in fact, you can see from this brochure from back in 2002, there were 8 issues that the organization divided their concerns into. And we now have a 9th one. We've added a 9th one since this coalition was first organized. So next, just talking a little bit about our different layers, because you may remember that we endorsed you when you were running for the school board, but that was actually not the Kentucky Alliance. The Kentucky Alliance is a 501c3, but we do get involved in the legislative issues. And so the legislative committee is a committee of the Kentucky Alliance, but we do have a 501c4. Dear JCPS has a 501c4 and serves as the lead organization for the political arm, essentially, just like many organizations have a 501c3 and also have a 501c4. And then we also work with Kentuckians for Real Options for federal issues. So depending on what the issue is and where our advocacy work is needed, that's kind of the onion, the different layers of the onion and some of the issues that we worked on. So I think you told us a little bit about yourself. I had a few questions just to break the ice. Not that you needed any icebreakers. But if there's anything in that list of questions that you might want to just tell us a little bit more about yourself, take a minute or two, and then we have, I think, 7 questions we'd like to ask you in addition, and CRT was one of them, so that one we may have already covered as well.
I mean, I can run through it really quick for those who are wondering, you know, who this chick is that just sort of showed up out of nowhere a few months ago. But actually, I grew up in Louisville. I grew up in, I guess, South End, Pleasure Ridge Park area. There's kind of a little area over between Iroquois Park and Dixie Highway that nobody really identifies it as a certain area. But off St. Andrew's Church Road. So about two miles from Doss High School, which is where I graduated from. Went to U of L, graduated, got my bachelor's in history. Sorry, it's been a long time. Bachelor's in history, got my master's in teaching, taught for some time, went back, got my rank 1 in school admin, and ended up spending a couple years at home with my kiddos. So that's why I left the classroom, not because I was disgruntled or upset or, you know, anything like that, or that I didn't love students anymore, but took a few years to be at home with my kids. I'm back to working full time now, and ran for the board largely because, you know, when I found out that Chris Brady was not seeking re-election, was the weekend before the applications were due. Let's see, I got a phone call on a Saturday and everything was due on that next Tuesday. And the phone call on Saturday morning was, hey, have you ever thought about running for school board? I had been active. You know, I had done SBDM, not just as a teacher, but also as the parent representative at my kids' school. You might remember, you know, when we were going through the threat of state takeover during Wayne Lewis regime, I was able to organize and reach out, reach out and get about 75%, I think it was, of our JCPS SBDMs to write their own statement in opposition to the state takeover. That kind of grew out of a conversation that I had with a friend, and I was like, you know, SBDMs are really they're the most basic, lowest level of elected officials, because you're elected by the parents in the school community. We should have a say in this too. You know, everybody's talking about stakeholders. Why aren't the SBDMs doing anything? So I reached out to a couple folks that were on the board at the time, and I said, is this something I can do? Is this legal? I also don't want to do anything that's going to thwart the organized JCPS efforts. I don't want to undermine anything that they're doing. And I got the green light. And so we were able to do that. And certainly not taking credit at all for blocking the takeover, but I think that it helped to contribute stakeholder voice that our community was in opposition to the state takeover. And I've just always kind of been a policy wonk. I dig through budgets for fun, that sort of thing. And so I was asked on that Saturday, like, hey, have you ever thought about this? Because there's nobody lined up. You know, there's no one who's applied yet that we're aware of. No one submitted, you know, their paperwork. And we're a little nervous. We're a little afraid of potentially who could run, or what could happen if no one runs. So I gave it some thought, and I guess on a whim did it, and found out that the day, let's see, I turned my paperwork in on Monday. Like I said, it was due on Tuesday. We thought I was going to be unopposed. And then my opponent showed up out of somewhere. She was an interesting character if you followed that race at all. She did some videos with Frank Simon, so that kind of clues you into where she is and where she would be on everything else.
I was going to chime in and say that, because when I started digging into the people who showed up at the board meeting Tuesday night, I got that one of the rabbit holes I went down led me to Frank Simon's video show, and the same people that were there Tuesday night are also appearing on his video. So it is definitely a close-knit group.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we know what they stand for.
You know, I dig into the big things, the budgets and all that kind of thing, and I do understand it, I think, better than most people coming in, not having had the background that I have and some of the experiences that I've had working, even just being able to read those munis reports, that kind of thing. I do a little bit of that on my day job sometimes too. So as far as accomplishments so far, I mean, I've only been there a few months. But I've certainly, I think, pushed for some answers to questions. I send probably no fewer than 10 questions a week. I think Dr. Polio and his staff probably on Monday mornings are like, okay, where are her questions? If I stop emailing, they'll come looking for me out of concern, I would hope. I think some of the biggest things is, one is the infrastructure. This is something I've been complaining about since I was in high school. Corner and Sam Corbett, when he was my school board member, wanting to know why my roof at Dawes High School was leaking and why we had barrels in our lobby every time it rained and things like that. So I think the infrastructure is huge. I think building the new schools is huge, and trying to find the balance, and definitely the school assignment plan. And I don't have all the answers to that, because I think it's almost it's a chicken and the egg kind of situation, in the sense that we absolutely need schools to replace those in our areas of town where they're just old buildings. I mean, they're in terrible shape, and that includes the South, and that includes the West End, includes downtown, it includes Newburgh. But then you've got to balance that with, we've also got this huge population growth in my district. So, I mean, the amount of construction happening in Middletown alone and in Fern Creek, we have to kind of balance that, because we can't ignore one problem while also addressing the other, because that's how we got to where we are, because they didn't build new schools as the population grew, and they didn't reinvest in the existing buildings. And so we've kind of got this situation now where we have to deal with all of it at the same time. And then I think the way that the student assignment plan factors into that is, we really have to listen. And I've been saying this isn't pandering, but we have to listen to the families and figure out where families want their kids to be. Because our community is so segregated by demographics, income. You know, I mentioned I live right here in Middletown. I can drive across the street, and if I take a right, I'm in Berrytown. And if I take a left, I'm in Anchorage, which, yeah, they're not our district, but it's so obvious when you go from one neighborhood to the other. And we have so many neighborhoods like that in communities like that across the city, that I don't know how we can fully address having diverse populations within our schools and getting kids in buildings where their families want them to be, without having at least some level of collaboration and support from the local community, be it Metro Council or whomever, to help just address those other issues of segregation. And, you know, don't drive past 9th Street and all those kind of things that we've heard for so long, that we have such a segregated community that the schools can't fix that on our own. We're going to have community partners to help us do that in a meaningful way. So I am open to listening to ideas. If somebody thinks they have the golden ticket for how to do that, or even peck at it, you know, what is it? You eat an elephant by one bite at a time. I'm very open into hearing commentary on that, because I think that's one of our biggest struggles as a district, but also one of the most complicated to resolve.
Well, we've got some slides on flipping the script and what we proposed when we had our Earn the People's Vote, the EARN, that included the student assignment plan proposal, but that's not on our agenda for today. So maybe we need to.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. I'd love to.
Can I add a comment, Gay?
Yes. Great.
I just wanted to thank you for recognizing the need to connect with community partners. As a grassroots organizer in the area of education for a number of years, it seems too many of the big decisions are handed over to a situation where we end up with half the board being big by necessity. And so big money in Louisville, progressive mind or not, ends up driving so much of the direction forward conversation. And I'd like to see more of a conscientious effort by the district to connect to grassroots specifically and have them as the lead suggestion makers.
Right. And a seat at the table.
Okay, can I say something really, really fast? Because I have missed a whole lot. You all, because I am dealing with customers. And I think my question that I wanted to ask, I'm going to come out here so I can take my mask off. The question that I wanted to ask is JCPS, and I don't know if this question was asked, so excuse me, forgive me. Is JCPS looking are looking to ask the grassroots organizers to assist in the efforts with this CRT issue and other issues that are trying to limit what we teach to our kids and limit teaching diversity and equity in our schools?
I think that's can I go a couple of different places with that? First of all, I will say that I have been a little bolstered and encouraged by the language that Dr. Glass, the State Commissioner of Education, has used. He has really doubled down on his commitment to diversity in education, whether it is within the curriculum, whether it's in hiring practices. He sends out those weekly messages. They kind of go to KDE employees, but they're also made public. I think you can probably find them on the KDE Twitter feed or things like that. But hearing that from the state level, I think helps to give JCPS and honestly all of the districts across the state a little bit stronger position within their community when some of these folks come at them and are like, oh, you're doing that. No, we're not, but we're following our state guidelines. Internally, KDE is having a lot of tough conversations, or critical conversations, I guess I should say, around diversity and what it means, and equity is at the top of the list for everything. So not to get off on a KDE rant, but I think it's important that KDE is acting as a resource to districts, including JCPS, within this capacity. I can tell you, I don't know what individual principals or district level cabinet people or folks are thinking, or how comfortable they are being very public, but I don't know, well, no one on the board has expressed any kind of retreat from the equity work that we are doing. And I can tell you that the majority of us are ready to double down on it. I don't care if I get reelected in 4 years. That's not why I'm there. I have no political aspirations. And I think most of my colleagues feel the same way. And so if we have to stand up to a bunch of racist bullies and say, no, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to do what's best for our students. I mean, if you look at the demographics of our district, even if you are completely, which I know no one in this group is, but if we're completely disengaged from education and what goes on in our community, if we just look at the demographics of our community, or our school community rather, well, both, but you cannot separate equity work from improving outcomes for students. You just can't do it. And so these folks that are coming forward, I don't want to say bring them on, because I'd really rather they just stop and listen and understand how they're undermining the practice for all students, not just the ones that they think are somehow getting something special or whatever version of reality they've cooked up in their head. So no one's backing off, no one's retreating. Trying to explain to folks what CRT actually is versus what they think it is, because they have conflated it to mean any kind of equity work, any kind of diversity work. And I've come back on some of these folks, and they've sent those emails that I mentioned at the beginning. I said, listen, and I've been talking all day through my job, so I apologize. But I just basically said in my email, like, equity isn't just about racial equity. That's a piece of it, but equity is providing ECE services. Equity is providing gifted and talented services. Equity is providing students with elective courses so that they can pursue their strengths and their talents. It's a different type of equity. But when you tell me you want equality, what you're saying is you want every student to get the same thing, regardless of what their needs are, their strengths, their talents, or what they're coming with, whether it's, positive or negative experiences. And they don't understand any of that. So I do think that one of the things we can do as a district, that we can do better as a district, is to educate the public about what these terms mean in the course of, or in the context of education. I don't know if that means town halls. I don't know if that means taking out full pages in the Courier-Journal, a really concerted social media effort, maybe all of it. I'm not a communications expert, but I think the messaging, what's happened is we've gotten behind and we've allowed this very small but very loud group of people who are wrong to dictate the messaging. And that's what we have to stop too.
So a couple of things you said that I wanted to just add on to. These folks have not come to work sessions before. They have not come to committee, community forums and work site-based decision-making meetings and being part of the solution. We're grassroots are doing this work, having the meetings, following the protocols, contacting our board members, doing all the things that even in a pandemic, when our ability to speak at, we've been waiting our turn to speak at board meetings for over a year. And so for them to just kind of show up and start making demands when they haven't asked all the right questions yet, and they cut in line essentially and just stepped all over the work that's being done. And so, I think that it needs to be recognized by the community. But also I think Tyra's question, I want to go back to what I think Tyra was asking, and you may have touched on it, but specifically, what is the district planning to do to reach out to grassroots and seek our involvement, seek our opinions, seek our input and a seat at the table? Because when we met with Corey Scholl, he said the district's plan was to utilize business leaders, work with the business community. And when we said, well, what about grassroots? He's like, you guys are welcome to do whatever you want to do. So like, there seems to be an intentional effort to work with business leaders, but not to work with grassroots groups. And so that feels kind of like a little bit of a disconnect because business interests don't share our agenda. And at the end of the day, they may say, this sounds great, and they settle on some kind of compromise while we've never been asked what is it that the community wants? What do the stakeholders want? The taxpayers and the parents, and especially those that are the most impacted. So I don't know if you have an answer. I think we just want to make you aware that that's some of the things that are being discussed. And if you can kind of help us create some space for some agency for those voices that we're trying to lift up right now.
I think meetings like this are important just to bring awareness to us as individuals, especially me. I'm only 6 months in or whatever. And so I know pedagogy, I know budget, I know school policy and law pretty well, but frankly, the political part of it, which I would, make this part of, for better or for worse, is not somewhere where I have a lot of experience. You know, I've already got some of the local legislators, state legislators that we share constituencies with. They won't take my call or my texts anymore because they know that what I say is not aligned with what the information that they are sharing with their constituency. And I don't have staff members or anything like that to help me get those messages out. So that's a struggle. So I think these kind of conversations are important. And I think even just, you know, if you're working with another group whose work overlaps, saying, you know what, you should talk to Sarah. I'm going to put you in touch with her. I think that's a place to start. I don't want to poo-poo on our business community, because I think that some of our partners have been really generous and they've helped us a lot in the last year. And you know, with the relationships we've built with like the Academies of Louisville, and those are really valuable programs. But the business community looks at the public schools as a source of workforce,
right?
Workforce development. And that's important because we want to make sure that our students go out into the world prepared to provide for themselves and to contribute financially. But I think that we also have to look at what are we preparing them to do in terms of be citizens, and how do we prepare them to just coexist and live in this world. And be part of their community. And I think that's where groups like this, and even listening to the people that I disagree with, you know, it helps to frame that big picture of, you know, I'll go back to John Dewey and the whole child. I think somebody mentioned that in the meeting the other day, the board meeting. You know, that's something that we have to do. And so we're kind of looking at it from different angles. And so when we do that, we have to take in all the perspectives, or we're not taking in the whole child. You know, it's great if somebody goes out and makes $50,000 out of high school, but if they can't function in society because they haven't been given the right skills to be proactive citizens and to advocate for themselves and all those kind of things, then we've failed them.
Well, and also I think the CRT message requires that somebody be pretty literate in cultural competency, language, and messaging, and we've not seen that from the business community at large. So, you know, if we want to have an effective fight, an effective battle, we need to make sure that the people that are being given the opportunity to say what needs to be said have the right, come from the right place. If that makes sense. Go ahead.
I was just agreeing with you.
So before we go to the next question, I have two things I want to do. We have Tila joined us, so I'm going to put her on the spot if she doesn't mind and just ask her to introduce ourselves. We all had to do it, so sorry, Tila. And I'm not looking at you right now, so let me go over there. Yes, there you are.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm Tila Scrub. I'm school counselor at a middle school on Rangeland Road, and I'm also the racial equity team lead at my school. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. In the chat, Jim asked if the board is going to allow speakers on July 27th, and Sarah replied she believes that's Chair Porter's intent. I know Tyra called today to ask that same question, and the secretary was out, so we hope to have a definitive answer to that tomorrow, Jim. And if so, we want to encourage everybody to sign up, call in and sign up to speak. So be on the lookout for a notice from Tyra, encouraging people to do that when they start taking signups. And Sarah, if you hear something, can you let us know?
Oh, absolutely. She said at the last meeting that we were going to start that again. She just didn't use the date. So I think, and some of that might have to do with like the timeliness that they can get out the media notifications and things like that. But we have the board retreat, which is, I'm not entirely sure exactly what to expect. That's on the 13th. And I'm not even sure if we're going to be meeting at Van Hoos or elsewhere at this point. So full transparency, I don't know.
I did an open records request today asking for any documentation so that we could find out when and where, what time, like all of that, because it's not published anywhere so far. So
4:30, and I just found that out last week when I texted her because I had to set up a babysitter.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll put that on our calendar because we can probably expect those other folks to show up, and we want to make sure that there's a counter message as well. So we're going to work on that too. I do have 7 slides of questions for you. So I don't know, I know you don't want to be on with us until midnight. So I'm going to try to push through the other slides a little bit more quickly. So if we interrupt you, please don't be mad. And if anybody wants to ask a question or add to it, if I may ask you because I know some people know some things about some of this stuff. But if not, feel free to type stack in the chat and we'll call on you. Question 2 has to do with systemic racism, just as patterns and practices, some of the things that we've been calling attention to for months and years. And I put the Thomas Jefferson name change at the top of the slide. And I also have another slide. In fact, let me just click over to that. TJ Middle put together a REAP on the name change, and the proposal hit the wall. They did a survey with 244 respondents. 80% agree it should be renamed. 89 agree it should not be named after Thomas Jefferson. We've heard that the current principal who's retiring is possibly one of the reasons why it hit the wall. She doesn't want this to take place under her watch necessarily. There's a really great Envision Equity article that came out in December that talks about, in fact, I may still have that. I don't know if it'll pull up if I switch screens, but it talks about how students should not be, and teachers should not be returning to TJ Middle in person or virtually because of the name of the school not being addressed and the impact that it has on the students that have to think of their oppressor every day when they go to school. Is there anyone on the call who would like to add to this slide? I put up here the map of where TJ is located. It's right in the Newburgh area. And are you familiar with this, Sarah? Are you familiar with this? You know how all the schools went through and did REAP?
Oh yeah. So I think I'd have to double check, but looking at the map, I'm pretty sure that that's Corey Scholes.
Yes.
So he may have a little bit more, insight or to why it just kind of stalled, because my understanding was if you have a policy, and this even goes back to serving on SVDM as a parent, if your policy can't pass the REAP, then you got to fix the policy. I mean, just that simple. Especially if and I would say especially if the school community is in favor of the change. I mean,
yeah, there's some political baggage that is apparently keeping it from moving forward. And so just making you aware, I feel like this is one of those areas where we can mobilize community around, and we're mobilizing people to show up at board meetings and take a stand in faith. This is why we need to teach culturally responsive teaching. We're not going to call it critical race theory, but this is why we need to teach equity and history accurately and all the things that we're fighting for, because people don't even understand how oppressive this name is and what this history is. So I see this as one of many issues that we can organize around, but also part of a pattern, patterns where we see roadblocks and delays and things swept under the rug and then forgotten about. So does anybody else want to add to that that's on this call? I'm not going to put anybody on the spot.
I'm going to put Ms. Scrub on the spot. And we both have a vested interest in the community. I know she's still there, so I'm going to put her on the spot. And she does, she's very eloquent in her delivery of this matter.
All right.
I don't know. I'm just, you know, we're gonna keep pushing on, getting our students involved. We feel like it being maybe more student driven. Sometimes people are a little more receptive to that. And so we're just trying to, you know, we have done, you know, some significant equity work this past year. I think some people are kind of, you know, trying to change, at least becoming aware. And, you know, our principal did allow for that time and intentional work with equity with our staff. So we would have various PDs throughout the year. And I just think that allowing those times to have conversations around race, you know, we did a book study using So You Want to Talk About Race, which was pretty powerful with our staff, and our principal, you know, purchased all the books and, you know, encourages the racial equity work. So I feel like people are, at least, you know, there's an awareness, and now we're trying to put some actionable steps in place. And so, you know, I thought that maybe the proposal may have not been maybe a priority with trying to get students back into school and the whole pandemic. And so we've kind of just been waiting patiently and just hope that, you know, as we, you know, people see the video with our students and the survey gets out to more people, that more people will even know this proposal exists. And so we'll just see what happens. But yeah, thanks for your support.
And I'll speak. I mean, I have a, you know, I have my personal, you know, thoughts and opinions and beliefs, you know, and I have my own perspective on, you know, how things are played. And you know, the principal has not been a direct obstacle, but I think that, you know, I'm trying to be as nice as possible in saying this, but I think that, you know, when you're truly about equity, that it shows. And I think that there is an element of behavior that is kind of like anti-racism, that you can say, well, I'm not racist, but that doesn't mean I'm anti-racist. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's an element of this that, well, I'm not going to get in the way. I'm not going to hinder necessarily, but I'm not going to be a true advocate. And and again, that's my opinion. That's my perception. I think that that's shown in other ways, but I will, you know, I am, you know, definitely agreeing with Tila that yes, you know, she hasn't been a direct hindrance or obstacle, but I also look at the other side of it of, well, what if she said no? And I know that we've had, you know, that's not going to stop. That wasn't going to stop me. And so she would have been in opposition to that work or to that piece.
Mm-hmm. So thank you guys both for those comments. I've got 5 examples, but really the specific examples aren't even so much the point as the pattern. And
can I add something to that, Gay? I'm sorry, I had.
Oh, yes, Greg, hi.
Thank you, Steve, for mentioning there is not a neutral position in today's world for racism. And these kids know. I've worked as a substitute for 10 years and 4 years as a PCE teacher within JCPS. And these kids know when their buildings aren't up to par, when you don't have a working sink, when you don't have a cold water fountain anywhere close to you, when you have to be concerned around moving ceiling tiles and or whiteboards for the asbestos that might show up. The kids are street smart and they know they're getting less than. I wanted to put a point in around teacher placement and what that does on the systemic racism side of things. As it stands, we've got a system that all the new teachers get their in the door in the tough schools, with the kids going through the most that they could in their lives, mostly due to economic repression. And so what we've got is a system where, not to overgeneralize, but the white female middle-class teacher comes in and they overwhelmed with the reality of teaching in poverty schools America. And they put in their time enough to get a transfer, being miserable because of the cultural misconnect that we're not intentionally trying to drive as a district, which would be highly beneficial from my perspective, from the teacher education side of things. They get their transfer in however many years it takes, and they never want to look back because their experience has been so bad. And so I'm interested in JCTA considering a quota of teachers in that 0 to 5 year range, a percentage of teachers in that 5 to 15 year range, and then 15 and beyond. We've got to find a way to balance the teacher talent with the schools that need it.
I think that's a great point. And that's something that I've even talked about. I mean, I'll share my personal story. I spent my first 2 years teaching at Mazik, which I think most of you know has a really interesting population in the sense that you have very high achieving AP and GT kids from Northeast Jefferson County. And then you also have kids that, and I think the borders have changed a little bit in the last 20 years, but, or God, 25 years, I guess. But you know, the kids that live in the neighborhood. And I absolutely agree with what you were just saying, because as a 21-year-old female, I was not prepared to support my students that were most in need. And the secondary trauma, that's real. You know, and when you don't have those supports and you don't have appropriate training and you don't know what else to do, you know, in hindsight, I can say, oh, this is what went wrong with 20. I mean, I was 21 when I started teaching. So, you know, how old am I? 42-year-old me, you know, half a lifetime ago, I would respond in those situations incredibly different because I've had so much more experience in education and exposure. But as a 21-year-old white female from the suburbs, no, I was not prepared to adequately help and support and teach my students. And my only option was to transfer, because if I didn't, I don't know that I would have stayed in teaching, because again, I didn't receive any support. I didn't know what to do. I can remember going to my principal at the time, who's long since retired, in tears because I had a suicidal student and I didn't know what to do. And she told me to go home and have a glass of wine, shake it off, and be back there tomorrow. So I think we've come a long way, but I love that you're talking about educator well-being and bringing that into the forefront too, because we've got to be able to support our teachers too and appropriately train them if we want them to be effective with our students. And it breaks my heart because I know I failed kids. And I wish I only knew a fraction then what I know now.
But we're in a system that's designed to fail students, is my question, I guess.
And other than changing the contract, because that in and of itself is a whole other beast, what can we do?
Well, I'd like to back up for a second and not assume that we can't change the contract, because I have been listening to Brent McKim for years say he's willing to make changes to the contract to incentivize teachers to stay longer at low performing, struggling schools. But the support piece is also critical. And so those are things that as a board member, you can advocate for in budgeting and procedural policy changes. So it sounds like you're on board with all of that. What I think is still missing from the conversation, what I picked up on from what Greg was saying, is that we still have a problem with educators who you sound like you weren't supported, but you didn't necessarily being culturally competent versus not being culturally incompetent versus not being supported are two separate things, and some teachers have both. And
I
so
absolutely had both.
So what we need to do is figure out a way to help identify and redirect and guide those teachers so that they're not doubling down on their denial, because that's harmful. That's one of the biggest challenges that we're running into, and that's kind of one of the dead ends. D here on systemic racism on my bullets is the dead ends with efforts for whistleblowers to raise concerns, because it turns into targeting and discrimination against the anti-racists who are mostly Black. And so that is there's a big gap, because when we try to escalate the teachable moment side of things and say, hey, there's a teacher over there at so-and-so that could use a tap on the shoulder. We came across one today, didn't we, Steve? That needs a little more than a tap on the shoulder. They're posting blatantly racist things on social media. You know that if they're in a classroom, they're going to be causing harm to their students. And so like, this is crisis kind of stuff. Like, as soon as we become aware of it, they need a training, they need an intervention, they need a redirect. And if they still can't acknowledge that they're on the wrong side of this issue, then they need to be removed from a classroom. And we don't want to fire teachers, but we also want to keep our kids safe from these behaviors and ways of thinking. So I don't know. I feel like they're just, we followed it all the way through to the investigation. Like when we met with Marty on this on several occasions, we met with Dr. Polio, and he's like, well, file a grievance. Well, we'd like to avoid it being going from, you really shouldn't have said that because it's not, you may not have meant anything by it, but it causes harm when you say these things. Like a gentle tap on the shoulder suddenly becomes a grievance. And then it becomes a lawsuit. And then we have lawsuits that are protected and settlements are kept quiet. And that was B on my list. And as a taxpayer, we have a right to know how our tax dollars are being spent to settle these lawsuits. But then there's this gag order associated with them. So we never really get to know what the patterns are, but we hear through the grapevine that these are patterns. And so then we are left with nothing but to believe, except the fact that nobody's addressing them at the root level. And we're taxpayers are just this bottomless pit that keeps paying out the same claims over and over with different names on them, because we didn't do something about what was causing it to get to that point in the first place. And so I know I'm throwing a whole lot at you, and I don't even really expect you to respond. These are things we wanted to just bring to your attention, and then just ask you to help us bring these concerns to light. Because again, this is why we need to be teaching cultural competency in our schools.
I think that's the value in these conversations though, Gay, is that I'm one board member. I think I'm there for the right reasons, but I don't have all of the answers. And I think that we have to look to the collective wisdom of our community to help us find these solutions.
Absolutely, but you do oversee the superintendent. Yes. And so when we meet with the superintendent and we raise these concerns to him, and then nothing gets done, or it gets swept under the rug, or gets kicked down the road now at 6 months or a year later, and the same things are still happening, we want to bring them to your attention because you're his boss.
Yes.
You're one of his bosses. So, we've met with Marty about all of these things. And the first time we met with him about how we were being shut out when it was time to lobby our position on the tax increase, he said he didn't know about it. He wasn't the one doing it. Oh, I didn't do it. Well, okay, but we're telling you it's happening. We're asking you to not let the bullies get away with what they're getting away with, because it was JCTA and the business community and the business elites really calling all the shots. And we were not only told to wait, we were sabotaged. We were thrown under the bus. Emails went out telling people not to partner with us. Why? We were lied to, and our plans were derailed by months. Why couldn't we be left alone at minimum? But that's not what happens. There are people out there who want to prevent us, and they're tied to, guess who? They're tied to the white supremacists. there's a line of communication that can be traced back to just a few individuals that are powerful white men that are calling all the shots in this district. And so we just ask for your help and your support and not letting them run roughshod over everything, especially when it comes to our kids and their money and our teachers and our educators in general, all the employees in the district and their families. So I'm off my soapbox now. Sorry about that. Does anybody else want
to add one thing too? I was concerned with some of your comments early. I think we as white people have a tendency to give into some twisted logic and families and where their families want them to go to school. I think that caters to a privilege, and I don't want my white child mixing with others and the other in our classrooms. And I was a little bit concerned about that because I think that is a wedge tool that's being used by the far right to keep white people in their place. And it's a dangerous line of logic in my mind. I'll add to, before I forget to mention it, I think the other is reinforced big time by us not having a coherent and a collective LGBTQ plus middle school curriculum that I'm aware of anyway. So I'm forwarding some stuff that I got from my Black Lives Matter at School Nationals to my counselor. And I think we let a lot slide in the middle school that I'm seeing that encourages a development of that concept of other through the sexual identity side of things.
Okay, I'll just comment on both of those. When I was talking about parents having a say, I think every parent should have a say into where their child goes to school. I don't know of any, I don't know that there are a lot of parents out there, unless they're choosing a magnet program for their kid, wants to put their kindergartner on a bus and send them an hour from their home or from their workplace. Or where a caregiver, whether it's grandma, babysitter, neighbor, whoever can get to them when they become sick at school, because we know that that happens, especially with our younger students. We know that the more access the parents have to the school building, the better for the kids, because then the parents can potentially go to the PTA meetings, or they can go to the events, whether it's the class parties or the all those different things that we see, is, again, especially with the younger students, field day, whatever it is. If your child is 45 minutes away from your home and you don't have reliable transportation, that has made it more difficult for you to participate in your child's education. So when I comment about parents having a say where their children go to school, I'm talking about every parent, not just those in wealthy, affluent communities, not just those who have the means to choose other options than public schools. If they, if they don't get their way, then they're going to go to the Saint this or Saint that or whatever. So I apologize if you thought I was only talking about one group of people. I think, for example, with the dual enrollment proposal that went forward, giving those parents a voice in where their kids go to school, instead of that decision being made solely over on Newburgh Road, helps to empower the parents and helps them to make the best decision for their family. Does that clarify it a little bit? I mean, I really am not.
So it's an equity position. I mean, you're taking your position from a view of equity, is what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. I can think of a number of families that I've known over the course of my career who chose for their kids to go to a traditional school or a magnet school or whatever, and that's fine. That's their option. That's their choice. But I think, again, especially with elementary students, I think most families, if they're not choosing that magnet option, want to have them close to home for all those reasons. Of involvement. So it definitely has to be parent voice, and parent voice has to be heard, and it needs to be heard loud and clear when we do put together the student assignment plan. One of the things that's hanging everything up is, you know, the tax referendum is going to the Supreme Court in Kentucky. And so it's difficult to put a timeline on anything when we don't know when those dollars will actually be flowing into the district because they've tied it up in court.
But is there a reason they couldn't go ahead and move forward with the dual resides component and start letting families choose? Like what you're saying about people don't choose to send their kid across town unless it's to some kind of magnet or whatever. Our West Louisville families don't have that option. They're automatically default assigned to a school outside of their community. And then they have to apply to transfer to go to Shawnee and, you know, any of the few schools that are in the West Louisville area. And we're still hearing from families that live in the Shawnee neighborhood that want their kids to go to Shawnee and they still can't because the whole plan has been delayed, including dual resides. And I don't know why the dual resides piece was hung up.
Why would they not be able to go to Shawnee? It should have the capacity to take a lot more kids at this point.
They don't. Okay, so they're automatically assigned to a different reside school and they have to apply to a transfer. So in order to, oh, hang on, I have a slide for this. In order to apply for a transfer, they have to meet criteria, and a lot of them don't meet, or they don't, it's too much work it's a hurdle. Why are we creating hurdles for our most disenfranchised families? So it should be default that they have a choice and don't have to apply, but they do. They still have to apply to get a transfer to the school closest to their home if they live in this colored block of colors that I've got pulled up on my screen.
Yeah, I knew that was still a problem for elementary while we're still constructing buildings. I don't have an answer.
It's always been this way for Shawnee. It's always been this way since my son was there and started there in 2012. If families lived in the neighborhood, in fact, hang on, I'm having trouble finding the slide I really wanted to show you, but because of this map right here, you see the black dot. Hold on, I was trying to move that up, follow me around. Okay. This black dot is where Shawnee is. This gray panhandle is where the resides for Shawnee is. So if you live in any of these neighborhoods here, you're automatically assigned outside of your community. And in order to go to Shawnee, you would have to apply and meet the criteria. And the magnet, the middle school is a magnet. I don't know what their criteria are, so that it's not a resides except for a certain color block on this map. So no, they can't even, and I guess with the renovation, maybe they're trying to keep the space down until they're finished or something, but there's a mom that contacted me named Jamie Brown just a couple days ago who she's got health issues and she lives in the closest to Shawnee and she wants her child at Shawnee and they turned her down. So she did escalate it to Diane Porter and Dr. Polio, and now someone is getting back in touch with her, and I don't know if they said yes or no, but it's this, she had to fill out the paperwork, she has to follow up. It's not equitable. Families who live where I live in the big yellow block off to the right, I'm automatically assigned to a school close to my home, and I don't have to lift a finger unless I want to go further away. So we should flip the script and make it so that our families in West Louisville are the ones that automatically have schools close to them, and encourage families outside of West Louisville to be the ones to drive further, come in the middle of the day for a meeting, pick up your kid if they're sick. Because the impetus behind how students are assigned out of the student assignment plan really starts at Shawnee. Like we assigned all back in, I have this too. I know we probably need to schedule another call to really go over all of this, but back in 2007, 2008, when the student assignment plan was really formulated, all the schools got a range of between 45 and 15% of high poverty, you know, whatever that number was, except for Shawnee, we stayed at like 87% or something. They never made us whole. And then they still continued to hold us accountable for the same meeting the same criteria and the same test scores and everything else. So it all starts out of Shawnee, and then they backfill because they bust everybody out of that Shawnee neighborhood. And then they have to backfill from Portland and the Highlands to get their population, to get their attendance. And if you go to Shawnee on the first day of school, you've got 100 kids that they have to corral in the auditorium to triage them and get them either figure out what school they should have gone to, because there's so much confusion. People automatically just show up to the school closest to their house because that's what people normally think is the way it should be. And it turns out that wasn't their school. Or B, they tried to apply. It was too much of a hurdle, too much of a barrier. They got turned down for whatever discriminatory reason, test scores, behavior, because they got in trouble on a bus because they're on a bus an hour a day. Their likelihood of getting in trouble on a bus, and especially if they have black skin and the interpretation of, you know, a hand gesture is different based on the color of your skin, you're going to have kids that have higher discipline numbers, which we've seen statistically the district does. So these barriers of discipline and grade point average prevent them from even applying to transfer. So they show up hoping that they can beat the system, and sometimes they do. But the first day of school at Shawnee is different than any first day at any other school because of this map right here. And families want to send their kids there and they're told no. I've seen it with my own eyes. So, sorry, I didn't mean to take that detour.
No, that's okay. I jotted down some notes for my weekly round of questions that I submit. So
I want to keep moving through these questions. The last thing on this question 2 slide that I wanted to point out to you, I've made several open records requests asking for employee data to be separated by race, and I'm told that they don't keep race data. How are we to know if certain employees that have certain experience or backgrounds are getting promoted at the same rate as their white peers if we're not keeping track of race? And that was the basis of the maintenance workers lawsuit, was that the black maintenance workers were always being training the white ones, and the white employees were moving up and becoming directors in other departments, while the maintenance helpers remained helpers for more than a decade at a time. We're not able to track those types of things if we're not keeping track of race. This one I particularly was asking about lawsuits. If we're seeing discrimination lawsuits, you need to know if race is a factor. And so when this screenshot just shows we do not keep data regarding litigation or classified claims, I have to move my little box out of the way, sorry. Let's see what it says. In the way you describe, and the way I described was by race and gender and whatever. And I got gender, I got tenure, like I got all the other fields I was looking for. So I just think that's something that I've raised a few times, but I don't have the kind of clout to make a headway. So, you know, if you could just simply ask, are we tracking these things by race? And, you know, what are we doing to make sure that things are addressed systemically so that they don't continue to happen? And then there was this other situation with Jason Nemus's wife having a position held open for her, having an offer extended to her that she was not yet qualified for. So somehow she was able to apply for a position she wasn't eligible for yet, interview for it, have them hold the position open for her until her certification could come through, while they put 8 other more qualified teachers on hold and eventually denied the position. And the reason I know about it is because one of those teachers has 8 years experience as an ESL teacher in JCPS, and Miss Nemus wasn't even a JCPS teacher. She was coming in from outside, and it was a coveted position in an East End school. So she's now an ESL teacher she's at Crosby and KAARPR, and so she's serving students that are probably in a pretty segregated situation at that school, at those schools. And so, and we've seen some problematic things happening with Representative Nemus. And so, you know, we're just concerned about these students and whether or not they're getting the teacher that's best qualified to teach them. This needs to be about the kids and not about the adults. And I just think it doesn't look real good. And so I just want to make sure you're aware of it. Again, because he's your employee. Yeah, and I mean, I'm probably too transparent sometimes, but my kiddo is going to be at Crosby next year as a 6th grader. So you'll be able to keep an eye on that. Perhaps I'll meet her. Maybe you will. I'm sure she's lovely. And it's nothing personal. It's just.
Right. No, I hear you.
Tyra says she keeps getting kicked out. Greg has to hop off. Good point. Stephen, do you want to add anything to what you wrote? Good point about parents having access to the building, increasing community, having parents and neighborhood kids in the building is frowned upon at some schools. Why is that?
I don't know if we need Tila again. No, I'm just joking. And again, I just said it was a good point. When you have a school like my former school that has space, has facilities, yet does not engage, embrace the community. I think that's an issue. And yeah, I was just just kind of expounding on the point that Sarah made, and it's true. Like, and also the point Greg made earlier, like you can go into a school and I've been throughout earlier in my career. I was in schools at all levels, elementary, middle, and high.
I know that.
Just recently, again, I met my new school, and just walking into the building, it's a big difference. It's a big difference. I can see it. Jokingly, I think I've said this jokingly to Tila, or I think she said it, but her oldest son is still on one of the banners at the school. And that was how many years?
He's 23.
He's 23.
Okay.
And
I appreciate it. Like, I'd love to just take the banner home. Like, we don't have to keep him up.
Well, that's one of, that's the school is a high school. And that's one of a few banners. And I'm going to definitely brag on my new principal. She has pictures of students that she rotates out every two years. And she takes them in 6th grade, and she presents those pictures, to the families when the student is promoted from 8th grade. And this is, so you see these things throughout the school. I mean, she recently did a mural in the middle of the hallway, and it's just, you go into a building and you can feel it, and what's there. Look at the school's website and then compare it to other websites. I mean, what's really there. And again, that you're not getting in the way of things, but we know it's real. And if you ask students that were there, if you ask teachers that used to be there, they know what it is. And thank God I lasted as long as I did, and it was for a reason. Because that just helped shape my experience, and I'm going to use that to continue to advocate for students, in the community. And when I say community, I mean the greater community, everybody.
Right.
But yeah, that was just a good point, and then I'm glad that Sarah recognizes that.
And I'm sorry, I'm looking at a question. Oh my gosh, they start talking as soon as I start talking. Okay, I'm looking at the question. It says, what teacher training is needed to ensure continued move toward culturally responsive teaching in all JCPS classrooms? Being on ACRE, that is one of the things that we are that we've implemented. However, it's not just the training that needs to take place. It's the teachers really buying in, this teacher buy-in to these trainings and making sure that they're implementing what is taught in the classroom. And so that's something that I'm trying to figure out a way to make sure that that they are implementing their trainings in the classroom. Like if you have a teacher that's doing, I don't even know, just trying to keep up with, what am I trying to say? With incidences or whatever, if it's the same teacher, same student, or same teacher with other students and students of color, of that nature. That's what I'm talking about. But there's other incidents, other things that we need to hold teachers accountable, because again, the teachers have to buy in. And some of them I know are not buying in. Some of the admin are not buying in. So that's pretty much what we need to focus on. It's not just the training, it's about teachers really wanting to make a change in their classrooms.
Just to kind of follow up with what Tyra was saying, this is a challenging question because I think that sometimes when we talk about like CRT and having an equitable like learning environment, I feel like sometimes teachers want some sort of checklist, you know, like what does this look like? And it's really hard to like, there's no one pager on how to be anti-racist or how, you know, it really is an attitude and mindset shift. And so it's challenging. I know that we have to continue to work with our teachers, but it really does come down to kind of like Tyra saying, them buying into it, but this mindset shift also, like their attitudes play a large part as well. So
I'm going to just jump in really quick because I know some people are going to be hopping off soon. Totally, I think I said a shameless plug. If you're interested, KDE is hosting the Persistence to Graduation Summit over the next couple of days, and there are a lot of really great sessions that deal with equity work. There's other things too, technology in the classroom, mental health issues and things like that. But tomorrow, the keynote speaker is Manny Scott. He's one of the original Freedom Writers. I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with that film, but he was actually one of the students depicted in that film. And he's going to be talking tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, that's my day job. Our keynote speaker is Principal Kafele. And I don't know how many of you guys, can you see this? Is it showing? Yep. This is his most recent publication, but he's going to be the keynote speaker on Wednesday morning. And the title of his session, and I might get this a little bit wrong, but it's "You Can't Just Do Equity, You Have to Be Equity." And I think that speaks exactly to what you were just saying a few minutes ago. And again, there are lots of different sessions about other related topics as well. But if anybody would like to be able to participate in that, the sessions are live tomorrow and Wednesday, but they're going to be recorded and available for 30 days after. There's no charge. Nobody's making any, well, somebody's making some money, but it's all paid for out of state Title IV activity funds. So there's no charge to participants to attend. So if you think, even if it's just for the keynotes, if you would like to attend, drop your preferred email in the chat and I can get you registered for that. You don't have to, no pressure, just wanted to offer the opportunity if you'd want to hear either one of those guys speak, because I think they're both going to be incredible.
Is it okay if I share it out on Dear JCPS and places like that? Is it for all teachers or?
I posted it several places. It's pretty much just like Kentucky educators. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'll just be candid. This was like my project that I've been working on for the last 4 or 5 months. And I think I only have about 20 open spots left.
Okay. Well, my first thought is the people who need this training are not the ones who are going to sign up. The people who need it are the ones who think they don't need it, right? To hear these speakers and participate in these types of events. But hopefully you'll get your 20 people and you'll have a full house.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had 400 spaces reserved.
Nice.
We have about 20 left, and it's statewide, educators from across the state, but.
Great, I see you got Tila's email address. Jim added a comment saying he wanted to add comments concerning CRT in the Kentucky Core Content Social Studies curriculum. You want to say something, Jim?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, as being a former social studies teacher, I think this is a fundamental issue. And right now, there is a Republican, Joe Fisher, who has an addendum to an existing bill, existing law actually, concerning teachers' rights to teach what they want to teach in their classroom. It is designed to diminish teachers' authority to teach African-American history, Native American history in their classroom. And I think this is a draconian bill. It's the first, teaching 31 years in the public school system, JCPS, I've never seen a bill like this before. It is designed to tell teachers what they can and cannot teach. And it comes with a a severe penalty if you're caught teaching something that the Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, decides is inappropriate and doesn't meet the criteria of the bill that is put forward by Joe Fisher. So I think that this is a bill we have to get behind and oppose. And it's just, in my mind, it's critical to be able to teach African-American history, not just for African-American kids, but for white kids also. Anyway, teaching it any other way, living out that history is a dishonest way to teach history. And it allows people who are, I don't know what the word is, white supremacists maybe be a bad word, but not anti-racist, to claim that African Americans are in the place they're in because they're lazy and they suffer from character flaws. And the history of the African American community in this nation really destroys that mythology. And so I'm thinking this bill put forward by Joe Fisher has to be opposed, and we have to organize together to get that opposition set up. And the other thing is that Attica Scott, the state legislature, she has put forward, she's sponsored 2 bills, 2 different years, designed to change, to require the Kentucky Board of Education to change the Kentucky core content social studies curriculum so it includes a more comprehensive African American and Native American history. And she's going to put that bill forward again in January 2022 state legislative session. And I think we need to get behind that bill and support that. It just is critical, not just for African American kids, and especially if you're an African American kid and you're bused from Shawnee to a suburban school, and you get there and you find out, well, there's 85% white kids there, 90% white teachers, nobody there, not many teachers there look like me, and they're not even teaching my history. How are you going to feel welcome there? So I think it is really critically important that we mandate, that the state mandates Kentucky core content curriculum that includes the African American, a comprehensive history of the African American community, not just for Jefferson County, although the Fisher bill is aimed at Jefferson County, but not just for Jefferson County, but for all schools in the state of Kentucky. This bill put forward by Fisher, the addendum actually, is a copy of the bill that was passed in the Tennessee state legislature, almost a carbon copy. And their intent was to diminish teachers' authority to teach African-American history. And I think that's immoral and unethical.
So
can I also piggyback up? I want to say something because we're talking about CRT. But my thing is, what I've been talking about for the last 2 years on the Racial Equity Advisory Council is that we need to teach before America, teach African history before America. And
absolutely.
I don't consider that being CRT at all. That's just history. And we need to learn about the people that was captured and brought over here to America to build this country, instead of the first thing they learn about in 5th grade is that they were slaves. That's the first thing that they learn about in elementary school, that your ancestors were slaves. This is how they lived. But it really doesn't go into detail. And it shouldn't in elementary school anyway. But they need to learn before. They need to learn their history before America. And I don't consider that CRT. I just consider that part of history. And that should be in the elementary social studies books. You kind of water it down for the grade levels.
So yes. I'm going to interrupt for a second because Sarah has told us she only has about 10 more minutes left. And I think she said that a couple minutes ago, so it may be more like 8 now. And we have about three or four more slides that we'd like to try to get through. So I'm going to just kind of go real fast through the rest of it. And maybe we can communicate through chat and some other ways to have some follow-up as well, or through email or messenger. But we're all on the same page when it comes to CRT, Jim. And in fact, after Sarah goes, if we've got some time to stick around, I do have an agenda put together for some of the things our committee can talk about and work on about how we're going to get organized around that. So let's have that conversation. But while we have Sarah on the phone, let's finish our board member questions. Number 4 is this is a slide from when we were campaigning around the tax increase. We had earn the people's vote, and it was EARN, and R stood for a resolution in support of the people's agenda, which was essentially a Black agenda, an agenda in support of the movement for Black lives. At the time, other districts across the country had some templates and some models that we were looking at. So I had some screenshots or I guess I had some links that I had sent to board members asking them if they would support a resolution. But with the pandemic and then the tax increase chaos and the lawsuit and everything fizzled. And so this was one of the areas that we were not able to get across the finish line, but it's a no-brainer, really. In fact, it would have been nice if we'd accomplished this when it was still kind of quiet and still before people were showing up at board meetings. But you know what? I'm not afraid. In fact, I think we should continue. And I liked what Dr. Polio said in one of the news interviews, that we're committed to this. We're not backing down regardless of these, he didn't say these crazy people, but essentially that's what he meant. And, I think the more things that we come out there with a counter response, instead of just tucking our tails and hoping they go away and don't hurt us too bad, let's be bold. Let's keep pushing for the things that we know are the right things to do, which include adding a resolution, just like we did with the Safe Haven resolution back in 2017. We asked board members if they would support it. So what we're really doing right now is asking, if a resolution came forward, would you support it? There's an example, this link here at the bottom. The state has issued one recently, so we could follow their model. And it's really just a movement, a resolution to support what's happening in our community right now. Would that be something you could get behind?
I think so. Sorry, I don't have my bifocal, so I can't read everything.
Yeah, these are just, this is from the JCPS website. It's just screenshots.
Yeah. It's not our job to be, it's not our job to be law enforcement. Our job is to love and take care of children and educate them the best that we can. And I think anything that asks teachers or school personnel to act as law enforcement de facto is just wrong and unethical. And yeah, I don't even know how much more I can say about that, other than I don't understand the rationale of the folks who don't want to educate immigrant children, because if they're here and they're in our communities, it's in everyone's best interest for them to be well educated. Aside from just a moral obligation to do the right thing.
Right, and so the board did pass a resolution supporting our immigrant children back in 2017. That's what this is, the precedent that was set. And so now we're asking for another resolution in 2021 supporting our Black and Indigenous persons of color population.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you were saying. I was trying to listen to you and my kids at the same time, so I do apologize for that. When you said it was similar to what the state board passed, and I think it's just a commitment to your values.
Right. So hopefully we can get some, at least 4 board members to say that they would support this, and get a draft circulated that we could encourage Dr. Polio to put forward for a vote. Hopefully soon. I think that the time is right. Let's encourage more dialogue around these topics. These uncomfortable conversations are best had out in public and in full force. Let's see, somebody just added a comment.
Me, I was kind of typing a little bit as we go. When somebody took a breath, I type a little bit, so it may not be grammatically correct, so I apologize. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Agree with the standards history content points. I will add that last year a bill was submitted that went nowhere, that required comprehensive health ed, that was age appropriate sex ed, nothing crazy, and it had a lot of body autonomy, healthy relationships, etc. I think Wilner submitted it, Nemo Carney, and maybe Tina Bojanowski were in on it as well. I hope they submit again. That isn't directly related, but an issue all kids would benefit from.
Yeah, they called it a sex ed bill. I mean, it had a component of that, but it was more of a biology lesson about yourself, not anything, you know, that should have raised alarm with anyone, but I don't think it even got heard. Tyra, yep, but you know, we know why.
Right.
We know why.
But I think, you know, they've prohibited us from showing up in the past, but eventually they can't keep us out anymore, and we can start showing up and making those demands and making them making sure we're heard. This was a slide I had on student assignment plan. We already spent a good amount of time talking about it, but if not now, when is our question. I mean, now more than ever, we need to make sure that our plan is not only equal but equitable. It's not even equal right now. So this was the screen I was looking for earlier. I forgot that I had moved it here because I was planning on showing it to you. Just showing the transfer requirement. If you live in West Louisville and you want to send your child to a West Louisville school and it's not one of your resides, you have to apply and you have to meet this criteria: 2.0 grade point average, attendance rate of 90%, no suspensions during the current or previous school year. So it's barriers that families who wake up in my neighborhood don't have to go through just to even have that as an option. So I would like to see that removed. And I've been campaigning for that since 2013 when I first became aware of it. Oops, my dog just banged into my.
Well, actually, I think they're limiting their suspensions, especially with elementary schools. So, and more so, you'll see that maybe in middle and high school.
Mm-hmm. We just voted on that as part of the new, I keep calling it the code of conduct because that's what I called it for 20 years. And now I can't remember what I'm supposed to call it. But yeah, we're not suspending babies anymore. And I think that's, I don't think we've gone far enough with it, but I think it's a good positive start to utilizing some of those trauma-informed practices and in meaningful ways to use our mental health experts that are going to be in the buildings and so forth.
So these last slides are just the things that Dr. Polio about, and I title of this one to just say Polio was informed. This is a list of bullet points that we went through with him, let him know that these two different coalition efforts were failed by more powerful groups that didn't want us having.
Sorry, if I'm on mute. Sorry.
It's okay. I'm just running through it really quick so that you can go because I know you need to go. Anything on there? The tax increase we talked about, scholarship tax increase lawsuit. Hopefully there will be a lawsuit over the legislation that just passed for the vouchers. And then, I just have this D on here. Misconceptions about our advocacy work continue to be spread by white supremacists. I think you're aware of this, Sarah, and you can decipher when that's happening. But there are a lot of attempts to smear the work that we do, and just want to give you an opportunity to clear, give us an opportunity to clear the air too. Me in particular, I get dragged through the mud quite a bit. So I feel like you and I stay in pretty constant communication. You're the board member I go to because my board member won't talk to me. So there are others we have to clear the air with, and you're not one of them. So, but I just want to make you aware that that's a concern.
Well, I hope that your group or you as an individual or anybody on the call, I'm still a student and I'm certainly not perfect. And I know that I have my own work to do. And if I don't understand something, if I seem tone deaf, if I'm not, tell me. I want to know so that I can reflect and be introspective and do better. So I'm pretty good at taking criticism. The only emails I don't respond to are the ones that just like cuss me out or that are so incoherent that I can't figure out what they're trying to say anyway. But I feel like I'm pretty approachable. I'm probably candid to a fault at times. I want to be as transparent as I can. I think the only things that, personnel issues, things in executive session, those kind of things that I'm legally bound not to talk about. But other than that, I think I'm making efforts to be as transparent as possible. So I really do hope folks feel comfortable reaching out to me and saying, hey, I've got a concern, or I've got a question, or you're wrong about this thing that you were talking about, or whatever. Because, you know, I'm on the board to try to help the kids and to improve the schools in our community so that they have better outcomes. That's it. You know, not the big. That was one of the other fun things last Tuesday. We pay your salaries, and I was like, we don't get a salary. But the stipend is, it's $100 and something per board meeting, not to exceed $6,000 for the year. So I figure I'm making enough to cover my babysitters for when I'm at the meeting. So that's about it.
Yep. Does anyone else have anything they want to add before we let her go?
No, I just want to thank you for listening and hearing us out, and hopefully we can make change together. That's all I want to say.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for coming, and I'm great. I mean, you're so bright, so smart, and it looks like we've got a whole new younger generation on the school board, and I think that's great.
Thank you for calling me young.
Thank you, Sarah, for coming on the call. Everybody else, if you'll stick around just a little bit, I have a quick agenda that I'd like to go through about some of the organizing work that we have ahead of us.
Well, thank you, everyone. Tila, you'll get an email from me probably here in just a little bit, because I'm going to go ahead and get you added so that you can join us for the next couple of days and hear Principal Kafele on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. You guys have a great night.
You too.
You too.
All right. So
I'm sorry, I'm out of breath and bending down.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. First, I want to take a minute to just debrief after that call and see if there's anything that we talked about that anybody wants to go back and touch upon, get more information. If it's something that maybe it's something you're hearing it for the first time and I didn't spend enough time on it or whatever, especially the new folks.
I don't know. I guess I just have a question, or I'm new, super green, whatnot. When we, I guess just our stance on, I know, you know, we talked about like CRT and, you know, like the truth matters and all that. When we talk about history, I don't know, I just got the thought of, you know, when we talk about Black history and Native American history and, you know, history. And I don't know if our stance change change or start using the vernacular of history. We are advocates and proponents of teaching history. It's not necessarily Black history. It's no Black history, you know, like, and I'm not saying I'm not on any like all lives matter, and, you know, because, you know, I think there are times where I think there are times in places where we you know, use that. And but I think that I don't know if we have just a stance of, you know, like we're advocates of history, you know, we're advocates of, but, you know, you also think, you know, it's kind of that double-edged sword, I guess, because you do want that message of Black Lives Matters. All lives can't matter until, you know, you recognize that Black Lives Matter. So I don't know. I just had that thought of just that history piece. Like we're you know, advocates and proponents of history, of the truth, and learning from it and recognizing, you know, the systems and, you know, what's being perpetuated and how to stop it and how to think critically. You know, like you know, and I think that's part of. So I mean, I guess marrying that with, I'm definitely high on what Tyra says about, you know, just the perception of Black people, because we know that does start young. You know, that I can't remember with that Harvard study or, you know, what that bias study when, you know, children, young, preschool, kindergarten prefer white dolls and consider whiteness, you know, the standard of beauty and all. So all those things do start young. So we could just, I don't know about how to marry those or what we need to say or our position and how we need to move forward. But it's just that history piece. It's just, I don't know. I think of the Black Lives Matter movement. Would it have the same edge, or would it have the same shock value if it just said all lives matter? If they said, every life matters or all lives matter, would it have the same? Because when we have to recognize that we, where we are, what our stance is, and that it's not necessarily the majority, and that, we do have to not necessarily concede, but make things palpable.
Right. Beat them at their own game.
Because when you say slavery, I was listening to a podcast. I think it might have been like Revisionist History. I can't remember the name, or Equity. I can't remember the name of the podcast, but, it was talking about, instead of, you're saying slavery, well, we're talking about crimes against humanity. We're talking about honoring, humanity. And when you put it in those different terms, human trafficking, and you're talking about the same thing, but that wall doesn't instantly go up. But you also have to, but you still have that thought in the back of your head. Well, you shouldn't have a wall because we said Black,
right?
So it's just, I don't know. I just putting that out there. Just I'm just sharing my thoughts or thinking out loud. But yeah,
Well, two things going on at the same time. That is, there's one political party that doesn't have a lot to offer its own people. That is, and since they don't have a lot to offer, they've sort of seized on these so-called cultural issues, of which, what is taught in schools is one, and critical race theory, so on and so forth. And so they're going to keep driving these, quote unquote, cultural issues, because they just don't have anything to offer. And they're afraid of what President Biden, because President Biden is trying to be Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the sense that he's going to put money in people's pockets and put people back to work. That's what Joe Biden is all about. And so that frightens one political party, that he might be successful. So the only weapon they have against him is these so-called cultural issues, of which abortion is one, gay rights is one, and just white supremacy, what people are taught about Black folk in America, so on and so forth. So that's one thing, right? Then there's another thing too. What is history? For instance, I had just happened to listen to, I guess, a conservative religious station on the car radio. I was going point A to point B the other day, and a gentleman on there kind of feels like history sort of starts with, the Romans and the Greeks, and that allegedly is the foundation of Western Europe history, allegedly. Well, in reality, the ancient world was a Mediterranean culture, of cultures that rose and fell around the Mediterranean Ocean. And in reality, the dominant culture was Egypt, and the Romans and the Greeks borrowed everything from Egypt. And so, but Egypt is in Africa. And so the people who want to teach, what they see is Greeks and the classics, the Greeks and the Romans, and what happened in Europe, and Europe was a backwater. Western Europe was a backwater for most of history, so it's not that much to teach. But they don't want to start off in Egypt. They just don't want to do it because Egypt is in Africa. So and so just where you want it. And so what people are talking about is talking about having an accurate version of history where everyone's cultures are included. That's what we're talking about, and the contributions of folks' cultures. this idea of history being progressive. Blaine Hudson said, history is not necessarily progressive. History goes backward as frequently as it goes forward. And then what I take off from that is, when I do it, I say, hey, look, when the Roman Empire fell, nobody in Western Europe took a bath for 1,000 years. So that's the reality of it all. Because it takes a lot of human energy to heat water to take a bath, and why even take one? So civilization didn't have a civilization to support that. So it's just, it's an accurate version of history. And so we could use this opportunity. Those are two things. We could use this opportunity of this attack on CRT, which most people don't know what is, to educate people, particularly in states like a state like Kentucky, and particularly educate the legislators, to start educating them. Because one, they don't know what CRT is. They don't want to know, don't want to recognize the contributions of other cultures. And they need to do that. And also, of course, they're afraid of their own children, because American young people across the board are sort of less homophobic and less racist than their parents. And so, one group, one side they're afraid they're losing the culture war. So that's why they beat the culture war drum. But they're dangerous, though. As I said before, maybe on our last call, that is, of course, in the Weimar Republic in Germany between World War I and World War II. It's very progressive, very successful Jews, gay people running all over the place, doing everything. And when Hitler took over, he wiped it all away. So we are at a dangerous time in history, and on a knife's edge, as they say. So we have to make sure that the tipping point goes in the right direction.
Yeah, okay, I agree with everything you said. But what we're looking at now is African American history being systematically, purposely omitted from the social studies core content in Kentucky and other southern states. And the purpose is very clear. They don't want that history taught because they'll have to change the way they vote and the way they think. So that systematic elimination of African American history is, like you say, it's really dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. It's the imposition of ignorance.
Yeah. So, Gay,
but it's not the first time.
Yeah, you're right. And it's been going on for decades. And so it has to change. So, Gay, how do we organize here to mount an offense against, first of all, the Fisher bill, and then the support of the Attica Scott bill? And by the way, Attica Scott is going to be on my program this week, Solutions to Violence, 106.5 FM, if you want to hear her remarks. You're muted.
Thank you for that. Absolutely, and I appreciate you sharing those emails with me, Jim. What I would like to do is try to get like a website or a Facebook group or something where we kind of aggregate the information that we've been putting together, like these links to these podcasts and radio programs, and more research and more the latest news, the latest developments, especially at the local level, or the parallels, just to help people see how ridiculous this counter argument that they're making really is. And I think we can shut them down in, one or two steps every time they try to push their narrative, if we're in that space and have that presence. So I think finding the issues that get us united around a message is part of that. And this TJ Middle name change, I think, is an example of some of the ways that we can do that, because what they have put together already, they've already done all the legwork. Like, the work is done. All we really have to do is just kind of package it and continue to present it, and help get people fired up, just like they're getting their base fired up to make them mad enough to show up. Well, we have to do that with the people who are supporting our work as well. We have to give them a reason to be fired up and ready to push the buttons. And the survey that they did can be turned into like a petition, where we can actually ask people to sign the petition and help us demand this name change, and then show up at the board meeting and fight for CRT. This is why we're fighting for CRT, is because things like this are still continuing to happen. People don't recognize the harm that continues to be done. We're turning a blind eye, and we're not done. We're not done. Racism is not over. This work is not done. So, you know, that's just one example. And continuing to showcase and discredit. Like, I did a hour-long live stream earlier this week, going through the news clips of the people that showed up at the JCPS board meeting. And I had dug deeper into who they are and other protests that they've been at and live streams that they've appeared on. And so this person's really connected to this person. And I spent an hour actually like clicking into these different profiles and telling people who they are. So those who are really interested can see that they're just phonies and frauds. Oldham County is having their school board meeting tonight, and they spelled things wrong on their poster. Again, these are gifts. These are opportunities for us to point why we need they can't even spell children correctly, and they're out there telling boards not to educate their children. Well, that just proves our point, right? So that's a really long answer to your question. We're still formulating a lot of the messaging and the talking points by coming to these meetings and getting everybody on the same page. Like, that is all part of the work that has to happen. Tyra and I talked this morning. We do need to get a statement out. We have one that we've started, that we've drafted. It's been circulated through text message, I think. So we probably need to get it in a place where people can actually type into it and make their comments and add their suggestions. So Colleen didn't ever make it on our call, but if we could talk her into putting it out on a Google Doc and then just reply all and adding it, then we can add our thoughts and our feedback to that and have a statement that can kind of be the basis for like moving forward. And Yvonne's done some work. She's not on the call tonight either, but she wrote 3 different letters that people can use to send to letters to the editor all over the state. It doesn't have to be just Louisville. She's got some letters that people can just put their own name on and send. So we've got some tools and resources that we just need to put it together, and we're all volunteers. So it's just finding the time to do all that. I've offered to put together a website, but I'm still trying to figure out like what we're calling it. You know, we need a domain name or something to house it onto, and so that platform still needs to be figured out, what it, you know, where we're going to start with all of this. And maybe a Facebook group is the best place to start, or just continuing to figure out what gels, because I think I had proposed Black History Matters in Kentucky, and I think we kind of stayed away from that one because we didn't want to make it just about Black history. I think is where we left it. I hear the caution with All History Matters kind of approach, because it sounds like we're diminishing. We don't want it to be the counter response to Black History Matters, but at the same time, that's what we're saying. They're not teaching all history right now. So maybe we could use their own thinking back on them in a way that gets them to go, yeah, right. And then before you know it, they're agreeing with us, and we're like, okay, let's go, right? I hear you. And it's nuanced though, so we have to do it right. And I don't think we have, when it hits, you kind of just know, right? And then we're like, yes. And I think we're almost there, but I don't know if we know what it is yet.
Well, it's almost, well, yeah, I'm sorry. It's almost like when you say like Black Lives Matter, and you let's just say you come across a, you know, whatever, and you say, you know, all lives matter, and you're, yeah, and then you say, well, you know, you just kind of ask like, do Black lives matter to you? Like, do Black people matter to you? And then, you know, you kind of create the conversation or spark the conversation from that, and you say yes, and then you'll say, well, you know, how do you explain these things, or what are your thoughts on this, that, you know, so you kind of, I don't, you know, and it's all conversation, it's all discourse, and it's all, you know,
and if we're saying things they can't disagree with, then they're going to look really stupid.
Yeah, you can't disagree with that. It's like, well, you know, so then why does, you know, when people say do Black lives, you know, and then they say why they disagree with it, and it's like, well, you know, it was born out of this, and this is why it's stated, and do you agree with that? And like, yeah, I agree. And because I was having a conversation, and I think we spoke about this when I was at, you know, Monticello, the school on Rangeland, and you know, I was talking to two bus drivers that were helping clean, and you know, one walked away from the conversation when I asked him about the name change. The other one stood there and talked about it. And in our conversation, he was like, I can understand now, because at first he was like, you know, and I just asked him, like, what do you think of the name? I didn't ask him, do you think it should change? It's that, and in our conversation, he could see my point of view. He was like, I understand that. I see why you would want the name to be changed. And I'm not saying he went and did the petition or anything. I'm just saying that conversation, he left that conversation with a different perspective. And that's all we're really trying to do. It's all we're trying to do for our students, for our kids, is that give them a different perspective, that it's not everything. And even if you include, you know, even with inclusive history, it's not every single thing that was ever written or stated or said. Like but you are incorporating different perspectives.
Right. And another thing too is when people say all lives matter, it's in response to Black Lives Matter, and that's when it's insulting. But if we're out there saying Black history matters, and then we're giving them an opportunity to counter with all history matters, so let's beat them to the punch and say all history matters, and then they're like, yeah, it does. I mean, maybe all history matters in Kentucky. Is that offensive? Is that going to be offensive to someone? It might. So I think we're not there yet, but I think we're getting there. And I think we have other things we can be doing in the meantime. It's not like we need to sit around and just wait for the moment to be right. And so keep doing the next right thing. And at the top of this agenda, ahead of CRT, I've added the Quintez support team, because as you know, we have a very special JCPS graduate who's missing. He's been missing for over a week now. And his classmates and some of his peers, I guess, have been reaching out to some of the people in our organization, asking for guidance and asking for leadership and asking for support. And in some ways, support they're not even aware they need yet, because you don't know what you don't know. And so Tia and Kimberly, Kimberly's not on the call, but she's been on our calls, as well as a few other people that I've just been reaching out to in the last couple of days. We're kind of putting together a little team to support those who are not just looking for Quintez, but dealing with the trauma and the grief of the uncertainty, and why this matters. Let's hope for the best, absolutely. But every minute that goes by, like the first 48 hours is critical, and we're now into day 8 or 9. And if it turns out that he wasn't just taking a mental break, we're letting clues get cold, right? And so what we're wanting to help the team that's doing the work is recognize the grieving process and that feeling of hitting the wall that they're currently at. Like right now, they've hit the wall. They're not doing the searches like they need to. They're mixing up their leads, and so their stories are getting convoluted, and nobody knows the truth about when he was last seen and all this other stuff right now. So those are the kinds of things. It may not be related to legislative committee work necessarily right now, but it's one of the more urgent things that we have in our community. And we are a village. It takes a village, and they're actually asking for our help. So how do you say no to that? But also there's a lot of overlap and a lot of intersectionality. And as we go out in that community and build those relationships and build that rapport and have these conversations and talk about structural racism and over policing and the pipeline to prison and what is happening in our community, and how it's all related. And as the momentum then shifts to the board meeting, you know, if we're working with them and supporting them and helping them between now and July 13th, I think I think I have some dates wrong on there because there's something on the 6th. I think it's the 6th instead of the 7th on that sheet. But if we work with them and support them until it's time to show up at the board meeting, then they'll have a better understanding of why showing up at the board meeting matters. And then we keep organizing. And that's what KA, you were saying about Angela Davis and the movement work, right? We just keep it alive and keep it moving to the next thing. Keep everybody gelled. Am I missing anything? You guys have any thoughts?
Well, yeah, Quintez Brown was on my program in 2018, so I'm just grieving also because I know how smart he was, how knowledgeable he was, and I thought he was on the track to become a state senator, maybe a U.S. senator. I don't know, but I don't know what else to do. But say, yeah, we certainly all of us need to talk about this idea that Quintez Brown is missing, and what can we do? I don't know.
Right. And I think some of the things we're talking about doing is like retracing some of those steps and creating some kind of clearinghouse of clues so that we not only know where the clue came from, like what the clue is, but where it came from so that we can validate it or even identify detractors, because there are people in the mix who are planting false information intentionally, especially when we're talking about LMPD being involved. Some of the people suspect that they're not helping solve it because they might be involved in it, if that makes sense. And
I think we can't rule that out.
We can't rule that out. We can't rule that out. And while people closer to him are grieving, some of us can be doing that work because we're not we are not against a wall and in denial and needing to hang on to that hope. I mean, I am hanging on to the hope, obviously, but it's not, I can't allow it to prevent me from considering these other possibilities and leaving no stone unturned, right? And I don't think we can expect everyone to be there, but those of us who can be there in that mental space can be doing that work and doing some of that organizing. And so I know it's a lot. This is the other thing I want to say. People have to pick and choose when they get in and when they get out of this work, but we're going to keep it moving. And if you can't do this piece of it, but you're down for the other piece of it, no one is judging you. No one is going to say, oh my gosh, you know, why didn't you show up for this thing we were doing? Because it takes all of us, and we all have to be able to tap in and tap out when it makes sense for us. And I personally have some travel plans coming up. So I know I can't even participate in some of the physical on the ground stuff, but I don't want to be the holdup either. You know, like, let's get everybody on the same page and create communication structures that allow it to just grow, right, and build. And I don't know if I know what that is. We started a little chat group, and right now there's only like 4 or 5 of us in it. I think if we grow the group a little bit more, the email list is probably a better way to communicate. So we can just reply all to the email because we're all on that email except for Tila. I'll add you. But you know, we can organize just through email right now until we get a better method. And if somebody wants to take it over and make it better, I'll hand you whatever I've done and please run with it. But I don't want anything to fall through the cracks because of me not being able to do anything. So
yeah, and I think we, as we talk to all the other organizations that all of us belong to, like I belong to FOR, we bring this up. It's going to, Quintez Brown is going to be on the second Thursday lunch, the second Thursday agenda meeting. So they can share, you know, everybody works a different ad. Every time you mention it, it spreads.
Absolutely. And by then, maybe we will know, like, there's this canvassing effort happening. So another thing that people need to be aware of is in Ferguson, after the protests in Ferguson, some of the protesters went missing. You guys have probably read some of those stories, right? So we can't rule out that that might be something that is happening here as well, because Quintez is not the only person who's gone missing. He's just probably the highest profile person who's gone missing. And, you know, there are patterns that we need to look at and consider as possibilities. And somebody from Ferguson is coming down to meet with this group as well. So, you know, we can provide them support. I mentioned the grief process. Kimberly is a counselor. Kimberly has agreed to provide counseling support for them, to help them work through the steps of grief that they're going through. And I happen to have reached out to somebody who was there involved with security at Algonquin Pool that day. So we've got a firsthand source. He wasn't a witness, but he knows people who are witnesses. And so we're going to get some firsthand accounts from some of the people that were there. So we're working on doing the work that's not getting done by LMPD because we don't want it to just not happen at all. And we're not perfect, but it's better than nothing. And holding it together until we get something that's concrete, you know? So that's great, Jim, that you'll bring that up, and by the we'll be communicating through email, so you'll have more information by the time you guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Also, other groups that we need to reach out to that have intersectionality, and Barbara's not on the call either, but she kind of mentioned that she likes making those connections, and so I kind of assigned her as like the overall person to keep up with who's reaching out to what groups and where we are with them. And then some of the groups that we've mentioned reaching out to, LSurge and I guess it's Fairness, I put LGBTQ community, but Fairness in particular, Greg was reaching out to Chris. And, you know, we need a spreadsheet that keeps track of who's reached out to whom and who we still need to reach out to. I'll sign up to reach out to SBDMs, which Sarah mentioned was something she had done previously, which I remember when that was happening, and that is effective. So I think SBDMs need to know that this bill is going to take their power away, because curriculum is a SBDM decision, and this bill will now force their hand and limit.
That's right. That's right. Good point.
They need to be informed that their powers are about to be stripped away again. BSUs, Tyra mentioned them. She doesn't look like she's still on the call, but she mentioned them, and I think she could probably help us reach out to them, although she's not adding anything to her plate, so we may need to find someone else who could help with that. And maybe even some of the folks on the call can say, hey, I'll take this piece or I'll take that piece, and just reach out to those groups and recruit. That's where we are, is we're in a base building recruiting phase. We need to consolidate our resources and our energy and start moving together as a big old blob, I guess. Black businesses, they talked about working with the business community, but I think if Black businesses knew that they were reaching out to the business community and they hadn't been contacted yet, then we know what's up. We know what's up. Animal rights is another group. There's a lot of crossover with animal rights activists and civil rights activists. And I reached out to the lady that I'm fostering a dog right now, and the lady that runs the no-kill shelter here in Louisville has a pretty well-oiled machine where she's got volunteers that come in and distribute food and stuff. And so I was going to see if we could get a meeting with her and talk about some of our ways we can support each other, because that's what this needs to be, mutual aid. How can we support you? How can you support us? Because it is all related. We're working toward common goals at the end of the day. And, you know, sometimes they might be able to show up for us, and sometimes we might be able to show up for them and look like a bigger elephant with bigger ears than we actually maybe are, because we don't have the same kind of money and resources, and oppression does that to impacted communities. It makes it harder and harder for people to actually show up. So we know that we're behind the 8 ball already. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Sure, good thoughts.
Tila, let me hear from you, because I've done a lot of talking, and I don't even know what you think about all this yet, but you haven't hung up yet. So I think that's a good sign.
No, I'm just, you know, learning and just being a part of this group. You know, I know that I'm new, and so I'm just really listening. You know, it's really good to, like, I don't know, just hear that a group of people share the same types of concerns and are trying to put some steps in place to do something about it. So yeah, I'm quiet, but I am listening and excited to be a part of it. So
right, good. Well, one of my faults or flaws, one, I talk too much, obviously, but two, I come on real strong, and I know it makes some people really uncomfortable, but so I didn't know how you felt about how I was kind of just laying it all out there for Miss McIntosh, but I don't mind hearing feedback.
oh no, I can appreciate you being forward, and you know, like being like, I guess this type of work, I mean, it's, you know, it's not always comfortable, you know, so I'm not I'm fine. I really appreciate it. So no, you're fine.
Appreciate that. Anyone
folks, I've got to get off here. So I just want to thank everybody, and Gay and KA and Steve, Tila, for listening and all your support. So, and Gay, I'll send you a list of organizations that we can add to this list here, reaching out groups also.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jim. I think I'm out too.
I think
All
that's
right.
the call. I'll do some follow-up through email, and we'll get everybody together. Thursday, we've got our call with James Craig, and we're going to go through some of these same uncomfortable slides with him too. So
Good deal.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
All right.